Turn to Job chapter 10, and we'll read just a couple verses to get our context. And Job has turned the corner. He's happy now. He's thanking God for all that's happened to him, and not. Okay, that's not happened. Verse 14, he says, "If I sin, then thou markest me, and thou wilt not acquit me from mine iniquity. If I be wicked, woe unto me, and if I be righteous, yet will I not lift up my head. I am full of confusion. Therefore see thou mine affliction, for it increaseth. Thou huntest me as a fierce lion, and again thou showest thyself marvelous upon me. Thou renewest thy witness against me, and increaseth thine indignation upon me. Changes in war are against me." So he's, we get down to verse 18. He's circling the wagons here, and he's also circling back to an old complaint, which we'll look at. Verse 18 says, "Wherefore then hast thou brought me forth out of the womb? Oh, that I had given up the ghost, and no eye had seen me. I should have been as though I had not been. I should have been carried from the womb to the grave." Remember what he said in verse 1. He said, "My soul is weary of my life," or chapter 10, verse 1. I will leave my complaint upon myself. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul." And so it continues. And he's speaking in the bitterness of his soul. You know, sometimes when do you ever complain about the same thing? I mean, it's never a new thing, but sometimes it's always the same thing. And he's kind of circling now, because he's back on "I wish I'd never been born" thing, you know. And I think we've all probably said that. I don't know. I've probably said it, half a dozen times. No, I'd say probably a baker's dozen. I mean, sometime I wish I'd never been born. You know, you probably said it, you know. And that's kind of what he's saying there. Now, you know, again, I say that with tongue in cheek, that I'm glad I'm not in this spot. But so look at Job chapter 3, and this is where he complained, or he said this basically the same thing back in chapter 3, except this time, and you got to read it real careful. He says, "Wherefore then hast thou brought me forth out of the womb?" He's talking about a live birth. And, "Oh, that I had given up the ghost." Well, you can't give up the ghost till you breathe your last breath. So in Job 3, he says, "Why died I not from the womb?" But he says, now he's still talking about a live birth here, because he says, "Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly?" And the thing there is that, you know, if you have soulish life, if you have the breath of life and you die outside the womb, well, I mean, it's a free ticket to glory. At least for we've talked about what happens later on, and I don't know for sure, but I think there's going to be children are a mystery to me, because I understand why God says they're innocent. I understand why He receives them. I just don't understand how they could never be tested. I just don't know how that could be. So it may be that, again, the thought that they come back in the millennium, He brings them back into the land, He resurrects them, and they live out a lifetime, and it's a lifetime of works. There's no faith involved. But they get to prove themselves. So maybe that's so. We'll see. And all I know is that God has the answer to that thing, and I'll be satisfied with it. Yeah.
I just thought if they could partake of the tree of life just like all the Jews that are born in eternity.
Yeah. They would. Look what it says over here. I'll show you this verse. Look at Revelation, I think it's 22. I may have to look for it for a second here. I think it's 22. Yeah, that's 14. Yep, there it is. This is what's placed on those in the millennium. "Blessed are they that do His commandments, that they may have right to the tree of life and may enter in through the gates into the city. I mean, that's not now. We're not keeping the commandments now. We don't keep the commandments to be saved. It's for by grace are you saved through faith, that not of yourselves, it is the gift of God. But in the millennium, it's pure works in keeping the commandments. I mean, the Lord's right there. You don't have to have any faith, right? So he says, why died I not from the womb? Why did I not give up the ghost when I came out of the belly? Why did the knees prevent me, or why the breast that I should suck? For now should I have lain still and been quiet. I should have slept, then had I been at rest. And he would have been if he came out of that womb alive. With kings and counselors of the earth, which built desolate places for themselves, with princes that had gold, who filled their houses with silver. Verse 16, or, here's another one, or as a hidden untimely birth, stillbirth. I had not been as infants which never saw light. Notice he says there, I had not been. Okay? People that have miscarriages come up. And I'm not going to argue with anybody about it, but there's a lot of scripture that says, and all you have to do is run the breath of life through the Bible. And there's something about it. Do I believe there's life in that womb? Of course I do. Do I believe that there's soulish, where there's the breath of life? I'll give you a verse here in just a second. But he says there, or as a hidden untimely birth I had not been, as infants which never saw light. There the wicked cease from troubling, and where the weary be at rest. There the prisoners rest together, they hear not the voice of the oppressor. The small and the great are there, the servant is free from his master. Wherefore is light given to him that is in misery, and life unto the bitter in soul. But he says here, wherefore then hast thou brought me forth out of the womb? Oh, that I had given up the ghost, and no eye had seen me. So he talks about coming forth from the womb and having given up the ghost. But he's saying, why'd you let me be born? Why'd you allow me to have life, to go through this? The other thing he says, if only I had died when I was born. Then he said, there's physical life, and there's when that soul becomes a living soul. And he said he breathed into man's nostrils the breath of life, and man became a living soul. Turn to Genesis 7:22. And like I said, if you take a different view on this, that's fine. That's fine. I'm against abortion. I believe abortion is sin. I believe it's an unnatural affection. So I have no problem with that. I'm not pro-abortion. I don't get out there and march with the anti-lifers. I don't know what you call them. Choice or whatever. Pro-choice. But I don't get out there and march with pro-lifers either. There's two things in the Bible that I think are like a trap. And, whatever a Catholic believes, I'm going to take a look at it real hard. Whenever you're dealing with abortion or suicide, just look at the Bible. I mean, don't just run on your emotion and run on what people are doing. Take a look at the Bible. How many of you think if you commit suicide, it's a mortal sin and you're going to spend eternity in hell? Okay. Why do you believe that? Because you looked at the scriptures, you saw that Samson committed suicide, and he's one of the. Okay, the Bible has the answer. Now, I don't have a problem with anyone taking a position on this. Dr. Ruckman said something one time that made me think about it. He said, if you believe, now, just hear me out. If you believe abortion is murder, if you believe it's murder, then the doctor should be put to death. The nurse that attended should be put to death. The receptionist that scheduled it should be put to death. And probably there is a male in there somewhere who should be put to death if he consented to it. And whoever paid for it should be put to death. Is that not what the scriptures teach? Suffer not a murderer to live, right? It says take no sacrifice for his life. So just think about that. You still believe it? Okay, that's fine. That's fine. Genesis 7:22. Notice what it says there. All in whose nostrils was the breath of life. So where's the breath of life at? It's in your nostrils. Well, when a child comes out of the womb, they have to give them that good slap. And the first thing they want him to do is breathe. Okay? Live births, no matter how short the duration of life, death certificates are generated. Did you know that? No matter how short. But fetal deaths, and that's what they call it, are reported, but no certificate is generated. It's almost even like the world understands a little bit about that. And again, I'm not for abortion. I'm against abortion. But I'm also for believing what the scriptures say, and not everything lines up with what the anti-abortionists stand for. Just like the suicide group, not everything lines up. Dr. Ruckman says you can get so hard on some of these things, and you can. Okay, I'll give you for instance. All right, your wife's having a baby, and it's critical. And I know it's a rare thing. Rare. But your wife can live or your child can live. Who do you choose? Well, I'd choose my wife. She's bone of my bone and flesh of my flesh. I can have more children, I can adopt children, I can do whatever, but I can't replace her, not her. And so that's my choice. That's what I would make. If I were on a boating trip and my wife was drowning and my kid was drowning, I'd throw the thing to my wife. Now, I might dive in. I'll dive in after the kid. I can swim a little. Don't get me wrong, bro. I'll dive in after the kid. If they learn a lesson or two, go under a few times. No, I mean, I'd dive in and try to save them. But I'm saying if the situation were that only one could be saved, who would you save? Now, some folks think, well, Now, I know what the woman would want to do. The mother would want to save the child, of course. Okay? And if you don't agree with that's fine. That's just, my point of view. I believe that would be proper. I don't have a lot of verses on it. And to be very honest with you, there's some things that I do not understand about it, of whether it's not murder even to begin with. Whosoever sheddeth man's blood, by man let his own blood be shed, right? But he would have to be, and when I say a man, you understand mankind. He would have to be a man. A dog's not a man, but I can shed a dog's blood. Dog's blood. That makes sense. I could kill the dog, kill a chicken, cow. I'm shedding blood, but it's not man's blood, and it's not coming from a being that is eternal. So there's one of those where let every man be fully persuaded in his own mind. He said in verse 20 there, I don't know, I probably just railroaded through about half a dozen things here. No, that's pretty much all I'm going to say about that. I'm going to pull I can't even think of his name. He says there in verse 20, "Are not my days few? Cease then and let me alone, that I may take comfort a little." And it's true, our days are few. I just picked 3 verses just right in a row. Psalm 102:3 says, "For my days are consumed like smoke, and my bones are burned as a hearth." Psalm 102:11, "My days are like a shadow that declineth, and I am withered like grass." And that's what the Bible likens it to. It likes it to everything from a leaf blowing in the wind to grass that withers under the heat of the sun, a shadow that passeth away, a flower that where the petals fall off it just kind of fades away. I mean, our lives are very short, very short. That's why you got to make, people say, well, you got to make the most of life. I believe that. Make the most of it for the Lord. Make the most of it for the Lord while you got the time. Do what you can, and do as much as you can, and pray the Lord gives you strength to do more. Because we're not going to pass by this way again. We are not. The rapture is a great thing, praying for it, hoping for it. Man, am I really hoping for it. I mean, I have never wanted anything more in my life than I want the rapture to happen. But I do realize that the second that it happens, my service for God is done. and what's done is done. I can't go back and undo anything. Well, couldn't undo anything anyway, but I can't go back and do something more. And I don't think any of us are going to get the glory and say, yeah, I did enough. I just don't think we're going to do that. I think we're going to regret not doing more. Psalm 144:4 says, man is like to vanity. His days are as a shadow that passeth away. So again, liken him to a shadow. So are not our days few? Yes. And because of that, Job says, cease then and let me alone. If it's so short, just leave me alone. Let me have these few days and have some peace and comfort. Quit afflicting me. That's pretty much what he's telling the Lord. Quit afflicting me. I looked it up, and Job asked to be left alone 4 times in the book. In Job 7:16, and now some of them may have been aimed at his friends, but at least, 2 and 2. 2 may be aimed at his friends, 2 aimed at the Lord. He says, I loathe that I would not live always. Let me alone, for my days are vanity. Then 7:19, he says, how long wilt thou not depart from me, nor let me alone till I swallow down my spittle? Boy, that one was... Then Job 10:20 says, are not my days few? Cease then and let me alone, that I may take comfort a little, where we're at now. And then in Job 13:13, he says, hold your peace, let me alone, that I may speak, and let come on me what will. So, he says, my days are vanity, leave me alone. Let me swallow down my own spit, leave me alone. Let me take a little comfort, leave me alone. You can just leave me alone, and I don't care what comes. That's the words of a desperate man. If God had left Job alone, he would have perished, not having repented. That's right. So it's a good thing he didn't. And I thought about, well, I wonder if God has ever said, leave me alone. And he did. There's one incident that's recorded twice where God asked to be alone. And thank God it was denied by Moses, who relentlessly intercedes for the children of Israel and gets a nation spared. He said in Exodus 32:10, which goes to show you that nobody needs to be alone. Exodus 32:10, now therefore let me alone, that my wrath may wax hot against them, that I may consume them, and I will make of thee a great nation. I mean, he's getting ready to wipe them out. Deuteronomy 9:14 restated, let me alone that I may destroy them and blot out their name from under heaven. And I will make of thee a nation mightier and greater than they. So there's something, when somebody says, just leave me alone or let me alone, maybe that's not such a good thing. Maybe it's a destructive thing. I know in this case, Job says it because he's upset with God, and God says it because he's upset with man. But either way, you notice that the Lord wouldn't leave Job alone, and Moses is there to not leave God alone. Because he just starts this argument. He just starts arguing for the children of Israel. Lord, if you kill them, you know what they're going to say. They're going to say, you brought them out here to do them evil. You know how that goes. You know how people talk. And he literally talked the Lord out of consuming them and destroying them. And the Lord changed his mind. Doesn't the Bible say the Lord is angry with the wicked every day? So what happens when you intercede for them? I believe that prayer works. He said, first of all, that prayer, intercessions be made for all men. So when you start praying for people, it doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter who it is. Doesn't matter how wicked they are. When you pray for them, God, who may be angry with them, he's fed up with them, he doesn't care if they perish. But you intercede for them, he says, okay, I'll try to do something here. I'll try to give them another chance. I'll present them, give them another gospel tract, or I'll slap them down and get their attention. I think it's neat how God makes sure, because the Lord had to know. Think about it. He's up there trying to give Moses the law. They're down there worshiping 2 golden calves and having an orgy. And you can just imagine how the Lord just kind of, the thought that came over his head, or in his mind, and just, I'm going to wipe them out to the man. But he made sure Moses is right there. And the funny thing is that it gets turned around where Moses wants God to wipe him out, and the Lord has to talk him out of it. And Dr. Rupp used to say, if they ever both got into the killing mood at the same time, wow, look out. Genesis 2:18 says, and the Lord God said, it is not good that man should be alone. Isn't it interesting that God became a man and then took a bride? And that bride consists of millions and millions of believers. I don't think God wants to be alone either. I think it's not good that man should be alone, but I think it's just as true that God doesn't want to be alone. He could be. I mean, he could exist fine without us. He doesn't want to. Okay, verse 21. He says, wherefore I go whence I shall not return, even to the land of darkness and the shadow of death, a land of darkness as darkness itself, and of the shadow of death without any order, and where the light is as darkness. How many times is the word darkness in there? It's like 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 times you find the word darkness. And then the shadow of death. You got 1, 2 times you find the shadow of death. This place he's talking about is not the grave. It's beyond where the physical body lies. Turn to Jonah chapter 2. Jonah chapter 2, we're going to see where it's spoken of. It's spoken of a couple times. Oh, I'm sorry. Both places are spoken of in the same chapter. Jonah chapter 2, it says, then Jonah prayed unto the Lord his God out of the fish's belly. He's in the process of drowning, evidently. He said, said, I cried by reason of mine affliction unto the Lord, and he heard me. Out of the belly of hell cried I. Well, is he trying to say that belly in the bottom of that whale, or in the whale's belly, is hell? I don't think so. This is after he's drowned. And thou heardest my voice, for thou hast cast me into the deep, into the midst of the seas, and the floods compassed me about. All thy billows and thy waves passed over me. Then I said, I am cast out of thy sight, yet will I look again to thy holy temple. And look at verse 5. And the waters compassed me about, even to the soul. This will be more than just dealing with the body. The depth closed me round about. The weeds were wrapped about my head. I went down to the bottoms of the mountains. The earth with her bars was about me forever. Yet hast thou brought up my life from what? Corruption. He died. When he says, listen, when this corruptible must put on incorruption, when he says that, he died. And he is crying out of where? He's crying out of the belly of hell. Now, I think he first started when that whale swallowed him. I think that's when I'd have been praying. As I'm going down his throat, I think I'd have been praying real hard. Everybody wants to think that Jonah survived being swallowed by the whale for some reason. I don't know why. It's a greater miracle to be raised from the dead after 3 days than to survive in a whale for 3 days. Which, supposedly somebody has. Somebody got, I don't know. But supposedly in history, they've got somebody that actually lived inside a whale's belly. I can hardly say that. I can't even imagine that. I can't imagine what it looked like. I mean, how much digestion goes on in 3 days? And I realize that Jonah's in there, but I don't think Jonah looked very good when he came out. He'd have stunk to high heaven. I mean, you're never getting that whale smell out, man. You're stuck with it the rest of your life. His skin could have been bleached white. I mean, really white, I mean, his hair could have been gone. I mean, never eat fish again. Just, yeah, Well, yeah, I mean, when they saw him, like, I mean, it'd be probably horrible looking, ghastly. And he stunk to high heaven, so nobody got around him. He said, when my soul fainted within me, I remembered the Lord. And my prayer came in unto thee, unto thy holy temple. They that observe lying vanities forsake their own mercy. And then in verse 10, and the Lord spake to the fish, and it vomited out Jonah upon the dry land. You see, that's the sign for Israel. It's the sign of the resurrection. 3 days and 3 nights in the whale's belly, or the heart of the earth. You know? They didn't get that, evidently. And by the way, they rejected Jonah as a prophet. You know why? He went to Nineveh. He went to a bunch of Gentiles, and they got right. Even Jonah wasn't happy about that. So they rejected him. One of the Pharisees says over there, well, go and search the Scriptures. There's no prophet from Galilee. I beg to differ. He is from Gath-Hepher, which is in Galilee. That's because they had already rejected Jonah as a prophet. And that's why he said to them, no sign shall be given you but the sign of the prophet Jonah. Why? Because they rejected Jonah, they rejected him. If they would have accepted Jonah, they would have saw, hey, you know, they would have believed the resurrection. Because it's obvious that Jonah died. But Jonah has got 2 things there. He's got a physical, he's showing the physical part, he's in the whale's belly, but then there's a soulish part, he's crying out from hell. You know, he's the only man in the Bible that made it out of hell to talk about it. I'm talking about in the Old Testament. He's the only one. I'm not talking about the Abraham bosom side either. And I wonder if it wasn't a place of darkness. Samuel makes an appearance, but he's resting in Abraham's bosom. And he says, and Samuel said to Saul, why hast thou disquieted me, as if he's at rest? Jonah wasn't resting when he's dangling over hell. 2 children are revived from the dead with no recollection. One of them, Elijah raises from the dead. There are 2 children. Elijah raises one, Elisha raises the other one. 1 Kings 17 and 2 Kings 4. But you don't get any information. A dead man touches the bones of Elisha and is revived, but no details of his soul departed yonder place. In other words, did he make it down there and come back up and then forget? If he was a saved individual, he made it to Abraham's bosom. Are they asleep in Abraham's bosom? I'm careful about that because the soul teaching soul sleep, but soul sleep is teaching that your soul's asleep in the grave. I'm talking about in Abraham. When Samuel says, why hast thou disquieted me, he's either, you take that he's at rest. Okay? So I think they can be conscious because evidently Christ went down there and preached to them. Job's 10 children were resurrected, but no info as to where they departed to or what they found when they got there. Everybody wants to know, somebody came back. Jonah came back. But he just didn't come back from a very good place. But he was glad to be back, I think. Dorcas or Tabitha is raised in Acts 9:40, but does not appear she departed for glory. And there's something in the Bible, in Genesis 35:18, it says, and it came to pass as her soul was in departing, for she died, that she called his name Benoni, but his father called him Benjamin. So, evidently, when you die, doesn't mean that exactly at that second, when you give up the last breath, the spirit, when you give up the breath, you're giving up the ghost. The spirit departs, goes back to the Lord who gave it. But that soul doesn't necessarily leave that body right at that second. And you say, well, I don't know how long. It could be different for everybody. Okay? Some of them a little bit slower, some of them a little bit faster. I don't know. Maybe the Lord decides when that soul leaves that body, because some of these people, I think in one case, and I didn't look up that verse where it talks about the soul had not departed yet. So it may be that it takes a little while, and that some of these people that Christ rose from the dead had just died. There were 3 that he raised, and they had just died. Maybe that soul's still there. Didn't depart anywhere. If it did depart somewhere, maybe it's at rest. I don't know. These are a lot of questions that I can't answer, but this darkness here in this shadow of death, he's talking about a place where there's outer darkness. Now, Jesus spoke of this place in Matthew 8:12. It says, "But the children of the kingdom shall be cast into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Matthew 22:13, "Then said the king to his servants, Bind him hand and foot, and take him away, and cast him into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." Matthew 25:30, "And cast ye the unprofitable servant into outer darkness. There shall be weeping and gnashing of teeth." So the question rises is, okay, if we know from Luke 16, we know that there's a flame in hell, a literal flame. He said, "I am tormented in this flame." Well, how can there then be darkness? How could there be outer darkness? Because look with me in 2 Peter 2. These angels are cast out there. 2 Peter 2:4. I'm in the wrong book here. 2 Peter 2:4. It says, "For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell," okay, we're talking about the right place here, "and delivered them into" what? "Chains of darkness, to be reserved unto judgment." So if you got a flame, how can there be chains of darkness? Look at verse 17 of 2 Peter 2. "These are wells without water, clouds that are carried with a tempest, to whom the mist of darkness is reserved forever." Look at Jude 1:6, or Jude verse 6. "The angels which kept not their first estate, but left their own habitation, he hath reserved in everlasting chains under darkness, unto the judgment of the great day." So in every case where you look at this, it talks about this darkness. But if you have flames, how can it be absent of light? There's 2 things. Okay. Supposedly, scientists have found that there is flames that are so hot that they're black. And I partly believe that. I don't necessarily believe that's the answer to this, but I believe that's a possibility, because if you ever look at a hot flame, it turns blue, but the hotter it gets, it almost turns invisible. But they're saying that the hottest flame out there is a black flame. That's a possibility. There's another possibility, and that's in Revelation chapter 9, verse 2. There's a reason why it's pitch blackness. Revelation 9:2, "And he opened the bottomless pit." Now this is the place hell is synonymous with the bottomless pit. "And he opened the bottomless pit, and there arose" what? "A smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace, and the sun and the air were darkened by reason of the smoke of the pit." It's enough to darken our entire world, what's down there. And if it can darken our entire world where we can't see the sun, moon, and stars, then I'll bet you it's pitch black down there. You know what they say at a fire, man, when the smoke fills up in the house, especially a dark smoke, you can't see nothing in front of you. You're blind. But we're talking about a black smoke. I used to watch all these shows, Jacques Cousteau, and Underwater Adventures and all that stuff. But the one time when they actually got down there with those subs that were remote controlled, and some of them that actually had a man inside, they had to withstand these huge pressures, and they get along the Mariana Trench, I believe it's called. That's about 7 miles down. And when they got down there, what they found, my jaw dropped. First, they found these really weird-looking worms and some crustaceans and stuff swimming around there, and they were living off sulfur. And where the sulfur was coming from was these vents, and they called them smokers. That's what they called them, no kidding. And these vents were cracks in the crust. And we know what came pouring out? The blackest, thickest smoke you've ever seen in your life. with probably a lot of sulfur dioxide or whatever happened to be in the mixture of that gas. And down there at that depth was absolutely pitch dark, so dark that these little crustaceans, whatever, they glowed. There's a glow. They were like glow lights. I don't know, but a lot of them were feeding at that level. They were just feeding off that sulfur that come out of that vent. They stayed around it because, I mean, you know how cold it would be at that depth. It'd be incredibly cold, and they were hanging around that vent, and they were just thriving from what was coming out of the vent. But you just look them up, smokers, and hopefully you won't get Marlboro commercial. They look up smokers at the bottom of the sea, or they'll talk about those vents. They call them something else. I can't remember what it was now. But look at those things and then think to yourself, I mean, what the Bible says about hell is true, because they always find out the truth. It's just look how long it's taken them to find out. But I don't know how anybody can see that and think, that's kind of strange, isn't it? You know, what's down there? Exactly what God said: flames and darkness and smoke. And those things, I mean, they were cookers, boy. I mean, it was not what was coming out of there. I don't know what temperature it was. Maybe they had said in one of those shows, but boy, that showed me you could be cast into outer darkness. If you're thrown into outer darkness, and I've told you this before, when we went on a vacation one time, went to the caves, Mammoth Caves, and we took the 3-hour, 6-hour, I can't remember. All I was thinking was, man, I shouldn't have took the long one, because it was forever long, and you're just walking and walking and walking. You know, I mean, I couldn't believe how deep this cave was and how long it was. But the only part that was so interesting to me is when he wanted to turn out all the lights. And he made us turn off our flashlights, and he says, I'm going to show you what absolute darkness is like. And when they flicked those lights off and all those flashlights were off, that's where you stayed. You were absolutely chained in place. Because there is nothing about this place like, steps and a walkway. I mean, it was just, crags and this and that, and you had to step over this and that. I mean, you didn't dare move. You could fall over or hit a rock with your head. So there you were. And I was thinking, okay, you can turn, I had my flashlight, but I'm thinking, you can turn them lights on any time. And he just left it like that. I'll bet you for a good 3 or 4 minutes. That's a long time. And because he wanted everybody to acclimate to that dark, there was no seeing anything. I don't care how acclimated you be, you're going to all of a sudden see. You could go like this, and you could not see it after 4 minutes, 10 minutes. There was no light. And it'll trap you in place. He's talking about a place like that. He says, without any order. I don't know what that means, but I guess it's just absolute chaos all the time. I think that's what hell will be like. The verse that Jesus Christ quotes about that place where the worm dieth not and the fire is not quenched, he says, where their worm dieth not. It's not that there are a bunch of worms down there. There are, but the people are the worms. They devolve into their father, just as we are going to be changed and look like our Father, or like Jesus Christ. They are devolved and they're looking like a serpent. And when Jesus Christ is on that cross, the true picture of that, he says, I am a worm and no man. Psalms 22. He's taking on that form because he's becoming that sinner and dying on that cross, and he's telling them what they're going to become. So they wind up down there as like a bunch of worms, and I just imagine them falling all over themselves and in the lake of fire. It's interesting about that lake over there south of Jerusalem. You need to study that. It's the lowest place on earth. Did you know that? It's the lowest place on the planet as far as the land. It's the lowest place there is. It's 1,300 feet below sea level. Everything flows into it, nothing flows out. The saline, the salinity of that area is 26 pounds per 100 gallon. And it's 3 times saltier than the Atlantic. Nothing is alive in that lake. Maybe up in the very northern portion where the feed comes in from the Jordan, but as far as the Dead Sea, there's nothing alive in it whatsoever. Not even brine shrimp can live in it. It's so salty and caustic. And you can't drown in it because you float. And there's a record of a king that threw a man in. I think it's Vespasian, the Roman king. They wanted to thieve. They got him for thievery or something. They threw him in there and they floated away. Because you can't drown. You can't drown in the Dead Sea. It's also called the Asphalt Sea. It's also where they used to find these big clumps of sulfur. And they would find it out there floating out of the sea. Sometimes it'd be on, and it was the merchants loved it because, I mean, pure clumps of sulfur, it's worth a fortune. So they would cut up, and they said they would find these huge floating islands of bitumen, like the asphalt, almost like tar. And that was valuable. So they were collecting this stuff and collecting but one of the things I read, and it's in the Bible, International Bible Encyclopedia. If you have the older version of it, it's a lot better than what they did when they did some revision to it. I happen to have that set at home, and I've got it marked in there where they talked about it catching on fire, the Dead Sea. That there would be this lightning could strike and hit it, but it's got so much bitumen in it, tar and oil and salt and brimstone, which is sulfur, and just float around, that it was not uncommon for it to catch literally on fire. Not the whole thing, but parts of it. And your Bible tells you that when God passes through the south country, that he's going to kindle a fire. Now, I don't, we say go jump in a lake. Now think of a lake that's on fire, that's burning, that can never be put out because everything feeds into it and not one drop comes out of there but by evaporation. Not one drop. Everything feeds into it and it just keeps condensing. Imagine it on fire and you can't sink. Truly a lake of fire. That's just a thought. But we know that it's south of Jerusalem where that lake of fire is going to be. And you need to read Isaiah 34, where he talks about the streams in the desert. The way down to that thing is called the Wadi an-Ner or something like, I can't, it's Arabic. It means the way of fire. And right down from Jerusalem where he judges the nations, right across from the temple area, you have the Mount of Olives. That valley between the Mount of Olives and Jerusalem and the temple there, that temple area, that is the Kidron Valley, the Valley of Jehoshaphat. And that's where he's going to judge the nations. And right there is the Wadi an-Ner, the way of fire. Cast them right in the lake of fire, right there south of Jerusalem. Now I think that's where the lake of fire begins, and it's going to continue there throughout eternity. Somehow he's going to sustain it for eternity. He can sustain it right now for 1,000 years on this earth. All he's got to do is set it on fire. I mean, all that stuff that's collected under there over the thousands of years, like I said, the bitumen, and by the way, they've been taking potash out of that for decades now. We talk about using it for fertilizer. But they've been hauling that stuff out of there. And so supposedly it's been shrinking somewhat, but we'll see. But it's just interesting about that area there. And it's called the Lot's Lake. There's just all different kinds of things about that. But even there, if you imagine something on fire and the smoke so thick that you're just blind. I think it'd be worse for me choking on smoke than being in darkness. If I still can't see, I'm in darkness. But if I'm choking on smoke, that's even worse. So, yeah, without order. I think they're just down there just weeping and wailing and gnashing of teeth. I think to get close to somebody is to just to be combative toward them. Whatever, if you can, you might not have any legs to kick with you. You turn into a worm. You just kind of writhe. So you tell somebody that. I mean, I don't believe that. I don't know. I don't see why not. Where the worm dieth not, and the fire is not quenched. Okay, that's all I got tonight. Anybody got a question or comment, or saying I'm getting out of here? You guys nuts.